Where is my curiosity not is probably the answer. I've got more ideas than I've got time to write. But I think right now the next thing that I am going to be looking at is really trying to understand some stockpile depth, both of the Gulf states, whether they have enough air defense interceptors, and then also for the United States. Does the United States have enough of the long-range munitions that they might need for some of the future conflicts that they might face?
I'm the worst risk player ever because I never knew where the Caspian Sea was. I was transfixed yesterday, Becca, of the Soviet Union. The Russians making drones, teenagers making drones in factories in the northern Caspian area. They float them north to south down the Caspian Sea to Iran. Is that legitimate that Putin could supply $50,000 drones to Iran in quantity?
I mean, that's what Russia has been doing. It has essentially weaponized its entire economy for the military war effort in Ukraine. And you've seen Russia produce these drones that were, frankly, initially Iranian-designed Shahed drones. They've produced them en masse, and they've managed to make them even better than what they were initially sent by Tehran. So now you have this reverse flow where you have Russia providing know-how and equipment to Iran, as well as China providing some of the critical components, whether those are chips or fiber optic cables that go into drones as well. So when we hear things from the Pentagon about the fact that, Iran's drone making abilities are completely decimated and that they won't be able to produce more, we do have to take some of those comments with a grain of salt for these very reasons. And I think this is also a hallmark of what we often see in protracted conflict. Longer conflicts where you've got cycles where you do have this high intensity fighting, but you also have these periods of rest and reconstitution as all sides try and rebuild. And I think right now we are in a current moment where you see Iran trying to rebuild its arsenal as much as possible for the next round of fighting.
Paul, the range of this is off AI, folks, 600 to 1,500 miles.
Yeah.
So you do a drone in New York, and you can fly it west 600 miles.
I don't know. Yeah, that's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Becca, we had a guest yesterday who really just kind of drove home the point, and I see it in your notes as well. This whole conflict with the U.S. from Iran's standpoint, it is existential. This is core to who they are and their future. That suggests that they're not very flexible. How do you think they might approach any compromise here, any resolution?
I think we have seen some very subtle, compromises from Iran's side in some of the wording on what they're willing to discuss. Initially, for example, they weren't willing to discuss parts of their nuclear program and their missile program. And now, they're open to discussion. That said, that is not enough for a compromise. That does not move the needle at all for Washington, D.C. And I think here you're absolutely right. It is an existential conflict for Iran. And that is where we come into tension with the two different strategies. Iran is willing to wait this out and have a war of endurance, if you will, for however long it takes. And we do see President Trump starting to lose patience a little bit and starting to try and find ways to break out of this current morass. And he thinks that pressure right now might be the thing to do so. But as we've seen thus far, Iran is not going to bend to pressure because of the nature of this conflict and how important it is to their very survival. So I think, unfortunately, we're at an impasse, which leads us to the potential for escalation.
And Becca, that kind of brings us, I guess, we've all, speaking for our audience here, we've all kind of come to learn the importance of the Strait of Hormuz if we didn't understand it and appreciate it before. Do we ever get back to an ex-ante situation where the strait is open? I mean, now that Iranians recognize, boy, that's a real powerful bargaining chip.
I think you have to define what open means. So is the strait going to be open for the complete and total free flow of commerce the way that it was prior to this conflict? No, probably not. We are not going to go back to normal. But what we might have is a new normal where you do have the strait relatively open, but perhaps under Iran's terms. We're not entirely sure exactly what that is yet, whether it is a toll, whether it is other forms of control. But you will see the Strait of Hormuz gradually open because of its importance to the global economy. But I think what you will also see is times at which the strait will be closed, or at least threatened threatened to be closed by Iran, so it can demonstrate that it still retains control and still has that lever if it needs it. And that's a core component now of Tehran's deterrence.
I mean, I'm sure we're going to call on you later in the week, Becca, but let's get out front of the president's trip. What you just described to 114% of our audience is the U.S. losing this conflict, this war. What's the level of weakness as President Trump travels to Beijing?
Well, I think weakness, deterrence, all of these things are like beauty. They're all in the eye of the beholder. It comes down to perception. President Trump does not believe that the United States is weak. And, materially, the United States is not. But the question here is, how does Xi Jinping see it? Does he believe that perhaps the United States is at a point of weakness and that perhaps he too can wait it out and watch the United States erode some of its global standing and the international order as it has previously stood?